and welcome to today's webinar, CDP Supply Chain Report Launch, Reducing Risks, Driving Business Value. This is the second session in the series today. So for joining us, first of all, Tutors is delighted to have with us today CDP, Jaguar Land Rover, BT Group, FirstCarbon Solutions, and Accenture with us today. Now, before we actually begin the presentations, I have a few technical instructions for this webinar. If you have any problems with the technology or audio, please use the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen to send a message. Select from the drop-down menu, send your message, and then I'll get back to you. I want you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we're going to hold a Q&A session at the end. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, please type into the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and then press send. If you'd like to connect through your phone, please use the chat box to contact me for details. With that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our presenters. Dexter, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Vanessa. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Dexter Galvin, and I run the supply chain program here at the Carbon Disclosure Project. This is the second in a series of 3 public webinars that we are hosting to launch our supply chain report this year. It's called Reducing Risk and Driving Business Value, and it's available on our website. We launched the report to the public on the 22nd of January, and we had significant media coverage from national newspapers to specific trade press all around the world and in many different languages. So I'm delighted that you can join us here to hear from some of the key participants in the supply chain program and to hear about their experiences of the program. We have a fantastic agenda today. I'm delighted to be joined by Ada Sharma from Accenture, who will be talking about some of the report's findings in greater detail. I'm delighted to be joined by Chet Chaffee from FirstCarbon Solutions, our scoring partner, who scored over 2,000 responses to CDP Supply Chain this year. Of course, I'm delighted also to be joined by our member companies. I've got Mike McKillop from Jaguar Land Rover, one of our newer member companies, and BT Group, one of our more experienced member companies, and we have Liz Cross from BT Group. And it's always great to have the member companies online about their experiences and how they're actually managing this issue in their own operations. At the end of the presentations, we'll have a short while for questions, so please do remember to chat through your questions to me or use the Q&A function, as Vanessa pointed out, in order to pose any questions that crop up over the course of the following 4 presentations. So just a little bit of background. Many of you will be familiar with the Carbon Disclosure Project. We were founded over a decade ago to accelerate solutions to climate change by putting relevant data at the heart of business, policy, and investment decisions. We've had some considerable success since then, and we now send a request for carbon and climate change data to listed companies on behalf of 655 institutional signatory investors, representing roughly $78 trillion worth of assets under management. We ask a large listed corporation to respond to CDP, we carry quite a considerable stake. Back in 2007, Walmart came to us after their experience of responding to CDP, the investor request in 2006. They came to us having had a very positive experience of the disclosure process and have learned significant issues around their own operations. One of the key things that Walmart had been focusing their efforts on was on their logistics fleet to reduce the emissions associated with their logistics fleet. When they gathered their data together for their first CDP disclosure, they discovered that actually the refrigeration units in their stores was one of the biggest sources of carbon emissions for them. So they focused their efforts subsequently on reducing their emissions associated with their refrigeration units, which saved them many millions of dollars in energy spend. They came to us and said, well, if this has been such a good experience for us, we should really start thinking about reaching out to our suppliers and getting them on board. And we started the supply chain program. So since 2008, when we had our first public iteration of the supply chain program, we've grown considerably. We now have 54 member companies, two of whom are on today, Jaguar Land Rover and BT Group. We cover a number of different sectors. And the 54 member companies will grow again next year for the 2013 process. We've already seen a significant growth in the number of suppliers responding to CDP. Back in 2008, we had 630 or so responses from suppliers. This year, we've had over 2,400 responses from suppliers. So those numbers are growing every year. If you are interested, you can look at figure 13 and 14 on pages 21 and 22 of the public report when you download it, which shows that just getting suppliers involved in the measurement and disclosure cycle that CDP Supply Chain runs, we're seeing significant improvement from repeat responding companies. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us today. I won't hold you anymore, and I'll pass over to Aditya Sharma from Accenture, who have been our report writers for the past 2 years. We've been very pleased to have Accenture on board writing our reports. I'm delighted to hand over to Aditya. Aditya, welcome.
Thank you, and hello everyone. My name is Aditya Sharma, and I'm the Operational Director for Accenture's Global Sustainable Supply Chain Program. And we are delighted to be part of the CDP family and had the opportunity to work with CDP over the past 2 years on the CDP Supply Chain Report. I'm going to talk about the latest CDP Supply Chain Report titled Reducing Risk and Driving Business Value. In terms of what would we cover, last year we suggested a sustainable supply chain framework to help build the business case across 4 dimensions of mitigating risk, reducing cost, enhancing brand, and increasing revenue. This data was particularly insightful as we saw companies not only making the business case, but also realizing benefits. To that end, we will talk about how identification is evolving. Inherent business continuity risk beyond compliance is bringing investments in efficiency and emission reduction activities, which in turn is leading to significant tangible benefits corroborating the business case. Finally, the leaders are also gaining competitive advantage such as brand enhancement and increased revenue from innovative business models as well. However, the data continues to highlight a consistent performance gap between members and suppliers, presenting not only a risk, but an opportunity for collaboration to raise benefits across the supply chain. Finally, we will discuss an approach on how to capitalize on the business case, driving value, cover 3 aspects of data, process, and governance. Up to this point, supply chain sustainability has been viewed as a cost driven by social responsibility. It is now the time to measure, value, and report the sustainable outcomes. One fundamental reasons for this is risk are becoming not only clear, but the impacts are also being realized. 50% respondents this year identified a current or a future climate change risk with potential to significantly impact business and revenue. Extra events could have significant business impacts in forms of increased cost, reduced capacity. It should be noted that risk identification is also setting the foundation for not only setting higher emission targets, but actually achieving emission reductions and relying monetary savings. But the most important point is that policy alone is not driving change. It's business continuity risk. As companies look to the future, should be aware of importance of protecting against risk and driving value for their business. This result indicated that Risks such as droughts, floods, hurricanes, and water shortage are major drivers for investment rather than just regulation. A clear indication of how organizations are prepared to protect and insure themselves against these eventualities. To quote the Vice President of Sustainable Development at World Bank, major climate events are already impacting today's business bottom line. Its costs and availability are being dramatically affected in many parts of the world. Private companies cannot and should not wait for international climate agreements. As companies are recognizing opportunities and risks from climate change, they should step up to the challenge and increase their climate-smart investments. We talked about how risk identification beyond physical risk was leading to more investments. In turn, investments are also making a difference in terms of not only cost reduction but also emission reduction. One of the areas where investments are being done are in energy efficiency and transportation fleets. In addition, members have started undertaking long-term activities like low-carbon energy installations with a longer payback period greater than 3 years, than their commitment to supply chain sustainability. Quoting the CFO from Diageo, in his view, effective management is about making choices that support the efficient growth of the business over the long term. It is insufficient and irresponsible to consider only short-term payback when making investment decisions. But the most important observation this year was that members have not only doubled in investments, but also in monetary savings, corroborating the business case. In comparison, suppliers are yet to capitalize on the opportunity and realize much of the business benefits. In addition, the leaders are also realizing additional value from brand improvement and innovative revenue streams. As people look at brands, they are finding benefits in terms of improving corporate reputation, improving brand value, understanding customer behaviors and trends. Also, on the other end of the spectrum, there is a key focus on innovative revenue streams, with focus around product and service innovations, new services, and communities. Just to highlight a few, BSF has moved not only in product innovation but also creating new services based on their latest business models. They now offer their customers a large number of sustainability services where its success and value through sustainability initiatives, which includes consultancy on energy management, assessment of products and value chains using eco-efficiency and life cycle analysis. Braskem has developed a new product called green polyethylene based on their interest from their customers in low-carbon raw materials and also based on the company's experience in manufacturing with the use of ethanol. This product is arguably less expensive biopolymer, commanding a price premium over conventional polyethylene, which uses fossil fuels. This was defined based on the investment in new technologies and on a lower scale compared with conventional polyethylene facilities. We have a PT group on the line, so I would also highlight some of the key points that they made in the disclosure. They have seen important benefits to their brand value on their programs to reduce emission and mitigate negative environmental effects. A wide variety of corporate stakeholders, as consumers, business customers, suppliers, etc., are increasingly looking for BT to demonstrate a strong commitment to tackle climate change. And BT's ability to respond to these needs has had a positive impact on the perception of BT's brand and reputation. 2012, BT handled more than 2.7 billion pounds in bids from customers who wanted to understand the company's credentials on corporate responsibility and sustainability, up from 2.1 billion in 2011. All this positive movement, there is still a performance gap between members and suppliers, which highlights not only a risk but also a significant opportunity. Just to highlight the gap, this year the average CDP disclosure scores for members was 82, as compared to 48 for suppliers. Likewise, the average performance band for members was B and D for suppliers. As discussed earlier, over 90% of members who have identified risk are also setting up emission reduction targets, and 69% of them are investing. In comparison, only 45% suppliers identified physical risk, and this is probably reflected in only 38% of them are setting emission reduction targets, and 27% of them are investing. There is a financial and environmental incentive both for members and suppliers to collaborate and close the gap. And a key area of how they're going about this is communication. Here we talked about the need for companies to build upon communication to deliver tangible benefits, performance. These findings indicate that companies with a well-established communication strategy who have been reporting their progress for the last 2 years, including ones who were first-year communicators last year, see significant improvement in value realization over the last year. And just summarize the opportunity, 20% of suppliers this year report saving of approximately $13.7 billion. Imagine the saving potential if all 2,004 suppliers reported savings. Now, quickly move to the call for action and the approach towards how to realize these benefits. This year's report suggests a three-pronged approach from data, process, and governance. With data, we realize the truism that cannot improve what cannot measure. For all forward momentum, data remains an often elusive piece of the puzzle. All is being collected through scorecards, questionnaires, audits, etc. Many companies are analyzing it and use the results to drive the sustainability agenda in their supply chain. Certainly, more often than not, data ends up being just data and not information that can actually be used for decision making. For example, organizations could use quantitative techniques and analytics to assess the costs attached to the climate change risks and automatically work towards reducing them. This should also be treated as a real cost in present, similar to other operational costs. The systems could trace change of its increasing and more important industries such as food and paper, consumer goods. Highlight an example. Walmart has initiated an ambitious program to track its eggs back through the supply chain to the hen itself. Designed not only only problem eggs being quarantined and not the entire egg cartons. This improved use of information is expected not only to result in direct savings, but also reduce the packaging material waste associated with the cartons and emissions involved in the entire chain. In reporting and sharing of sustainability-related information is one of the key imperatives to drive the sustainability agenda. CDP is working with other organizations such as EcoSys to encourage the use of CDP data and reduce the duplicate request. Just to highlight, one supplier this year received 20 requests from customers through the CDP Supply Chain program. Collaboration means to respond only once, rather than 28 separate and potentially different requests. This piece of the puzzle is the process. Organizations need to weave in sustainability into their day-to-day operations. Also, will have to identify business-critical processes with significant sustainability impact to start the change process. Process changes is more likely to provide sustained benefits and clear roadmap to move one level of maturity to the next. For example, process maturity journey could start with the simple foundation aspects like having a procurement policy in place, a sustainable procurement policy in place, and slowly evolving into supplier audits and contractual obligations. For example, Empirical Tobacco has integrated price increase for its suppliers to their sustainability footprint. Now, a supplier asks for a price increase due to energy cost. Empirical Tobacco first turns to their CDP reporting history. They require reporting on energy and climate risk management before granting the increase, unless there are exceptional circumstances. The third piece is governance. Last year, we talked about how number of invites were resulting in probability of reporting. More invites corresponded to an 85% chance of suppliers reporting. Hiding, the companies are identifying this as a business demand and business necessity. Here, we explored this further. The number of invites are correlated to other discernible changes, such as 9% of suppliers getting more than 3 invites have graded strategy, as opposed to only 57% of suppliers. Or 54% suppliers have getting more than 3 invites reported monetary savings, as opposed to only 25%. A key aspect of governance is change management. In addition, functional collaboration is also an area of focus. Primary responsibility to drive sustainability in the supply chain needs to move beyond the payment function. To create value for customers, companies are improving collaboration among internal functions, focused on carbon management and sustainability. The Accenture CDP survey indicates that marketing and legal functions are now more involved in sustainability decisions. Are now looking beyond the traditional areas, but also focusing in activities such as product design to reduce their emissions. Pause at that, and I think we're going to take questions at the end, and I'll hand it back over to you, Dexter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aditya, and thank you for your great work on this year's report. Again, the report is available from cdproject.net. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to our scoring partners, Chet Chaffee from FirstCarbon Solutions. Chet, are you there?
Hi, Dexter. Thank you very much.
Right. Welcome.
Well, welcome everybody. As Dexter mentioned, my name is Chet Chaffee. I'm with FirstCarbon Solutions. We are the exclusive scoring partner for the supply chain program, CDP. I'll start by introducing our company just a little bit. First established in 2008 by the ADEC Group, a company with over 14 years of experience in reducing costs, optimizing resource use, and driving efficiencies. We have sustainability experts on our team, all have more than 20 years of experience in delivering consulting services, software solutions, data management, and data processing. Over the 2 years, we've scored over 3,500 questionnaires from suppliers participating in the program, and as Dexter mentioned, with over 2,400 this year alone. To being the exclusive supply chain scoring partner, we also participated in scoring in the investor program for the DACH and Nordic regions in 2012. A bit about scoring. All closures are scored in 2012, and they were by FirstCarbon Solutions. It's originally developed to help investors to have a trick to evaluate companies' ability to handle climate change, and that was in 2008 is when it began. Scoring methodology is published on the CDP website prior to every reporting cycle, and it's a very important document that all of you should pay strict attention to because it gives you great guidance on what's being looked for in terms of assigning scores to the answers in the CDP questionnaire. Today, the purpose is to help suppliers and procurers benchmark suppliers and highlight areas for improvement. Here from Group Stereo that I won't read to you right now, but as you read through it, you'll see that they depend on CDP quite a bit to help them understand their position as well as benchmark their suppliers so they can continue to move the bar forward in terms of climate change mitigation. The other thing that's very important for you all to understand is when your scores are tabulated and information is put together and CDP puts that information out in the marketplace, it's highly regarded and highly used. In a 2012 poll of experts on Rate the Raters, you'll see CDP came out far and away the most competent and most trusted resource for carbon-related information. It's well above the next two, which are the FTSE and the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So we're paying attention to this information and what provide to CDP important because it goes out widely to a global audience that's paying strict attention and looking to CDP for answers. So what's in the scoring? When you fill out your questionnaires, they're scored in two general categories. One is disclosure, and the other is performance. Disclosure, you may remember, is about the transparency and robustness and completeness of the information provided, and performance is about your actual carbon change management and how it's performed over the year to decrease carbon emissions year on year. Each category is broken down into several subcategories, and the scores are actually averaged across those and provided in reports as well as back to you as feedback. So it's been pretty clear in 2011 and 2012. In both years, the subcategories of governance and strategy, emission reporting, and emissions management companies have done very well and their best answers and achieved the highest average scores in the disclosure category. But average in those same years, answers to risks and opportunities and stakeholder engagement verification have been lower. Now, the reason for that is that risks and opportunities involve quite a number of pieces of information in each of the questions. Not only do they ask you about the types of risks, the types of opportunities, but there are parts of the question about the financial aspects for mitigating risks or take advantage of opportunities, and also the financial implications for the business in terms of things to be gained and costs to handle them. So it's a difficult question. They have a lot of pieces, so pay particular attention to those as you're working through this. Stakeholder engagement verification, often those are on average lower because supply chain members on average don't have third-party verification for all their GHG emissions inventories the same way the investor side does. So it's another area to pay particular attention to. This pattern in performance, that emissions performance and stakeholder engagement verification on average are scored lower than the category of governance and strategy. Like verification stakeholder engagement is about the third-party verification. Emission performance is typically because we see fewer companies setting targets and meeting their targets in the supply chain program, but that number is growing every year and people are doing a much better job. Remember the supply chain program, there's a more first-time respondents that may only be measuring their emissions that year, which makes it harder to set targets and show emission reductions. But here we expect those numbers to improve considerably. So let's switch now to some point guidance for you as suppliers as you're in the program. These points really highlight the things that you should be paying attention to throughout the questionnaire because they'll really help improve your scores. Complete sections and all questions. Don't leave anything blank. Question seems duplicative, copy and paste. Just don't assume that your answer in one place is good for an answer in another place. Approachments where they're required, and if you have to attach the same document multiple times, please do so. Don't use hyperlinks. Provide examples where appropriate. If an entire program is not able to be discussed, you can certainly provide an example of something that's going on. There may be a specific initiative in a given vision that is exactly what CDP is looking for in terms of an answer. Simply because it's not corporate-wide is not a reason to not answer it. Please provide those examples. You will at least achieve some points by providing those examples. Be careful, I said before, to address all points, like in risks and opportunities. There's often multiple sections of things. You can even use headings in your answers to reference various points to make sure that they're picked up by the scorers. Never backwards or forwards from a question to another question. Again, copy and paste if necessary, but provide an answer for each question. And when qualitative questions have criteria in the methodology, so pay attention to the methodology guidance document and the scoring document, and make sure you cover all the points for both qualitative and quantitative questions. Last, what I remind you of is there are a variety of resources available to you, many of them free of charge, that can help you understand the program, give a forum for asking questions and getting answers about the program, both before you fill out the questionnaire and after you fill out the questionnaire and get scored. And all these resources can help you better understand the program and help you adjust and prioritize your efforts to do a better job in filling out the questionnaire and improving your scores year on year. First of all, there are free briefing calls for any supply chain participant who submits a questionnaire. The CDP sends out an email to all of you when the scores are going out and reminds you that you can call and schedule or even schedule a briefing call, and for no cost to you, get on the phone with a member of FirstCarbon Solutions who will walk you through your scores and give feedback about them. You get a customized report when you schedule a feedback call from FirstCarbon Solutions that gives you a variety of details to put your score in perspective. There are webinars offered by CDP and by many of the members. Participating in webinars can help you understand more about the program and, again, give you a forum to ask questions and get answers to things where you need to know things. CDP is always available, and you can email CDP, and they will always answer back and help you with questions about their program. And lastly, of course, there are services from a variety of sources, including FirstCarbon Solutions. And as a scoring partner, we put our knowledge about the scoring methodology for our clients to help them better understand how to answer questions in the CDP questionnaire. I'll wrap up with a quote from Laurel Ross from American Licorice, and I think it's a particularly insightful one about the briefing calls. Here's a free service. And what it writes is, after trying to analyze our CDP feedback on our own, we decided to talk to FirstCarbon Solutions for additional insights. The information FirstCarbon Solutions provided in this consultation was invaluable and gave me good direction ideas on what American Licorice needs to work on this year. And that was in 2011. Finally, all of the companies that call and go through a briefing call have questions that we them and give them a better understanding of what their scores mean in perspective to all other participants. It helps them quite a bit in terms of, again, deciding on where they need to place their effort and what particular things they need to pay attention to. And we'll get back to Dexter, and thank you all for joining the webinar. I wish you the best of luck in 2013 in filling out your CDP questionnaire, and I know you'll all do a great job.
Thanks much, Chet. Much appreciated. And of course, I would encourage all suppliers that have responded in 2012 to continue to follow up with FirstCarbon Solutions and make sure that you get your free feedback call to understand how you may be able to improve your response. Delighted, of course, to have some of our member companies online now. I'm going to hand over first to Mike Mikhailik from Jaguar Land Rover. Mike, are you there?
On the line, can you hear me, Dexter?
You're loud and clear.
Very good. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to CDP, Accenture and FirstCarbon Solutions for the excellent report that's produced this year. It's easy to understand. It provides a lot of insight. I hope our suppliers are finding them useful as well. So I don't know if someone could load my slides. I think someone's going to do that for me. Thank you very much. Next, please. I'd have to apologise to everybody because I've lost control of my slides, so I'm having to do it remotely on the phone. I think the first point to say is that JLR sustainability policy as it relates to suppliers today has been one of communication of our required standards rather than an active partnership, which is the direction we hope to be moving in. Certainly, as part of our JLR Vision Triangle, I'd need to highlight the importance of sustainability within that. Next, please. Now, in our last 5 years' experience, we've been running a program internally called Environmental Innovation. And again, that's had very much a strong focus of internal at JLR setting targets for our own plants, our own facilities. But that focus needs to start to change, to start looking at the supply chain in more detail. Next, please. More importantly, with regard to that change, our next 8-year plan coming up to 2020 is being formulated, and that's going to be completed by the end of March, and that will have a strong supply chain targets and amounts of work and actions contained within it. Next, please. And next again, please. Now, in terms of our journey with CDP, we certainly want to be a dynamic partner with our suppliers, and we don't want to suddenly load a new strategy going forwards for our suppliers. And so we've started talking to CDP quite early on, initially in 2011. Next, please, and a few next to get to the end of this slide. Actually, that puts us through and down as an initial party with the supply chain, CDP Supply Chain. So I say I was a first-year member. We did a pilot in 2013, and we went to our top 120 suppliers in 2012. And that has the fit to getting our suppliers used to seeing that this information is important. Now, from 13 to 2020, where we are here is that the are going to be set in how we use CDP is going to be very much dependent on what comes out of what we're calling our 2020 vision for sustainability internally. But certainly some ideas that are being put through that is working in partnership with our suppliers, and the way that CDP works to actually provide objective scores, it can provide a format for decision making in sourcing. It can be another criteria to be considered. Next, please. So, why we participate? So it's not that awareness. It's to get an awareness for Scope 3 emissions that we're responsible for, and it's to start to drive awareness into our suppliers. Our suppliers to be aware that sustainability is of great importance to Jaguar Land Rover and of growing importance. It gives us visual data to provide a better understanding on the strategy review that we're currently doing, and it encourages suppliers to measure their emissions, get them up to speed of the things that are going to be required in the future. Next, please. And I hope our suppliers get a lot out of it as well. There was one quote that I heard recently that by a CDP being requested of the supply chain, it naturally identifies efficiencies and improvements in carbon management in the suppliers, without targets being officially set. Therefore, those opportunities are beginning to be recognised and beginning to be worked upon. Next, please. 3, and next, please. At the age, Jaguar Land Rover just 1 year in, it's about awareness and progress and not perfection. We're about to move into a new era for Jaguar Land Rover and what we're asking of our supply chain, and probably also in the automotive industry as a whole, and I'll talk about more of that in a minute. Next, please. I don't want to talk extensively on what our results have been for the latest CDP supply chain, Jaguar and Land Rover. However, they've been encouraging. For our peer group, they do appear to be above average for the overall score, and we do seem to be on the average for the grade being provided as well at grade D. So that's encouraging that there are a number of suppliers there, but there's obviously a great deal of discrepancies within that. We've got some suppliers that are very active, I would be more active than VAR is, and doing more than JLR in terms of sustainability actions, and actually also operate their own supply chain disclosures through Carbon Disclosure Project. Next, please. But we need to try and consider now what are the themes going forward in the future. Now, sustainability practices are certainly going to become more embedded within Jaguar Land Rover, and that we set ourselves are now going to start being placed into the supply chain. There is going to be a greater focus on the security of the material supply and the resilience of the supply chain, and we'll be looking for opportunities to take a standard approach working with other OEMs. What does that mean to our suppliers? Next, please. Well, suppliers, taking each of those points in turn, sustainable supply chain performance is going to be an attribute in future sourcing decisions, so the performance here is going to be very important. Disclosure is going to be one of those strong attributes that come out of that, and the ability to do that is really connected with the work through the Carbon Disclosure Project. Now the information on risk mitigation is going to become more important, which means we're going to need to understand the whole supply chain, and that's going to be a request that's coming out more and more. The disclosures obviously of great importance, and that point's been already, so I'm trying to do quite a lot of work with my PMs in the automotive industry to look for opportunities to provide shared disclosure. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity in letting me talk to the audience. So the last passive statement is the sustainability requirements are really going to expand going forward into 2020, and what we're seeing from certainly some of the reports that the Carbon Disclosure Project is providing, that successful businesses often have the actual attributes of being ahead of the game now through their sustainability performance. Thank you. Back over to you, Dexter.
Thanks, Mike, and great to see your ambitions there extending out until 2020, and to see that your focus is really on supply chain emissions as well. That's fantastic to see. Of course, Jaguar Land Rover growing and a very successful business at the moment as well. So those extra challenges of the expansion, of course, into emerging markets. I'm going to hand over now to Liz Cross from BT Group, and we're delighted to have Liz on board. Liz has a huge amount of experience of working with suppliers and some great insight into the CDP Supply Chain program. So, Liz, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, sir. Just waiting for my slides to appear on the screen. I'm going to share with you an overview of BT's engagement on carbon, our suppliers, and how we want to try and use the CDP supply chain info that we've got from this year's activity more to help us engage with our suppliers and help them to do more as well. So just
able to advance them with the arrows on the top of the screen.
Okay, right. Just for the arrows. Left or the top right?
We can for you if you'd like.
Okay, you do it for me because I can't see any arrows. Next slide, please. And one click. Okay, so in terms of, if we're going to talk to our suppliers
I expect them to be more engaged on carbon. We have to be ourselves. I think it's very difficult to have these expectations of your suppliers if you haven't been there and know what you're talking about and know the challenges that they're facing already. So this slide just sort of summarises very quickly the sort of things that we've been doing for quite a long time now. What the challenges for us in a business where demand is growing, where broadband speeds are growing enormously across the UK, and the rollout of broadband is a major project. All of that means that our network's growing, the energy consumption potential for our network could also be growing. So we've worked very hard inside BT to reduce our energy consumption, to try and decouple that sort of network growth from our energy consumption. And we have managed to start to do that. You can see the gap between the bars, which is our energy consumption, and the trajectory that it was on up till 2008, 2009. So that's one of our internal big successes. So in a sense, that's evidence that we know what we're talking about, we know what the challenges are, but we also know it's possible. And not energy focused, but also we're very focused on what happens to our waste, diverting it away from landfill, putting it into recycling schemes, so that the material and therefore the embedded carbon in waste is put to good use rather than just lost and it's a spent force. So moving on. So here's a snapshot about the procurement side of BT. Obviously, we're a big company. We spend around about £10 billion a year with suppliers across the globe. We have about 18,000 suppliers. A lot of them are quite small, one-off purchases, but a substantial number of them are the top end of our spend. And in fact, the top 200 suppliers constitute about 70% of our spend last year. So there's quite a strong focus at the top of that sort of spend period where we're trying now to engage and drive action. The other thing about our supply base is that it is global. We have suppliers and we have our own presence in 27 countries plus across the world. So the carbon focus is global as well. So an organisation like the CDP, which has a very broad range of members now, is also very helpful to in getting that global reach too. Just to show you why our focus on supply chain carbon is really growing now, is having reported our own carbon footprint for a number of years, and as I demonstrated, reduced our carbon significantly over the time we've been measuring it. Once we start to look at the carbon that's in our supply chain, the upstream carbon from our supply chain constitutes 70% of total carbon footprint. So the scope 1 and 2 from BT plus the scope 3 from our supply chain is the size of that second chart, the yellow being the scope 3 supply chain carbon. So given the scale of it, it's almost a no-brainer that we really need to be engaged with our suppliers and how they can be effective in reducing their carbon. So this slide summarises how we've been engaging with suppliers this year. So we've been looking in more detail about their emissions management, and our top 200 suppliers, that key group, are those that we're really focused on in terms of, are they all reporting by the Carbon Disclosure Project? We've set ourselves a target that by the 2014 reporting year, we want all of those suppliers to be actively engaged in this programme. And the reason for that is quite simple from what you've heard from Accenture and others today. If suppliers are engaged with CDP and reporting their carbon progress, then it's almost a given they're going to be doing the right thing. They will be doing better things than they would be doing if they weren't thinking about it because they're reporting. So that's the logic behind that. We've been in detail in terms of the top 10 to 15 of our suppliers in terms of what they're doing and how their carbon targets, i.e. their reduction targets, fit into our reduction targets. Do they add up? Are their targets tough enough to help us to deliver against our targets as well? So we want to see how joined up and aligned we are there. We've also been looking at how some of the smaller companies who we did some work with a few years ago, how they're shaping up. And what we're seeing now is that some of the suppliers who participated in our carbon workshops are really engaged now. So I don't think there's necessarily an argument to say that it's easier for big companies to engage than small companies. It's more about the sort of the motivation and the awareness, I think. So again, the supply chain program helps us to stick to that. The final thing we are doing this year is just reviewing and refining how we measure supply carbon emissions, looking at how the data that's reported by our suppliers through CDP can be inserted into our supply chain carbon measure to make it more and more accurate and reflecting real carbon savings that our suppliers are delivering. So moving on. So just a couple of slides around what we've learned this year. We know that our carbon disclosure supplier responders are generally above average in their performance. Their disclosure score on average was 59, which was above the average, and their performance score was in a C band rather than a D band, which again is above average. So that's the evidence that, again, that suppliers that are reporting are on the case and are definitely looking at their carbon emissions and how they can reduce them. I also know that our response rate was an average. It was about 55%, but having heard other companies reporting what their response rates were, I know that we can do much, much better. So my challenge this year is how do I get the suppliers who were invited last year but didn't respond to participate this year? Because it's all very well to say the suppliers reporting are doing pretty well. The question is, what about the suppliers that aren't reporting? How well are they doing? And that's the big unknown at the moment that we want to close the gap on. So moving on. Just to sort of reinforce again that we know that suppliers are engaged on this across the piece. This is a snapshot of one of our own surveys of suppliers where we've been tracking our suppliers, whether they've got a carbon reduction policy, whether they're measuring their carbon emissions, and whether we have targets in place, or they have targets in place to reduce them. And again, we know that the suppliers that are reporting to us on this through a survey are, on the whole, engaged. And particularly, again, our top suppliers are particularly engaged. We're almost up to 80% of those having policy, for example. The small suppliers, about 50% of them are engaged to the point where they've got a policy, fewer on the monitoring and measuring, but nonetheless, engagement's out there. But it's about how do we corral the rest of our suppliers into the same level of engagement. Moving on. Is there a few more times? So this one is to get at how in practice we're driving the internal focus inside procurement on supplier engagement. So targets in place for our buyers to make sure that the sustainability and the energy consumption of the products that they're considering buying is taken into account in their adjudication criteria. Last year we had a target of 85% on this one, and we exceeded it, got to 87%. The target's gone up this year. The challenge is that over 90% of our competitive contracts should have this adjudication criteria in place. And I have to say that we've been running this target for a number of years now, and across most of our procurement activities, the buyers are well aware of this and do it. There are some outposts that I've still need to get fully aboard, and that's my own internal challenge. We've also been looking at how we can bring standards into our contracts, our engagement on climate change. And that's a new target that we've brought it on board in terms of putting a contract condition and a standard into our contracts, new contracts with suppliers, and we're making progress there. And then taking it further, we want to look at the bigger sustainability picture to see how our suppliers can reduce energy and reuse materials in terms of product design and their manufacturing process. And this is something we've started to engage on with some of our suppliers this year, and we'll be taking it forward over 2013. So it's about taking the programs further and deeper into our suppliers and how they develop products for us and how those products perform if they're out in the field as well. Moving on. So Our plans are how can we support the reduction of supply chain carbon further, and if all of our top 200 suppliers, for example, did engage and report via CDP, will it show that good engagement on carbon? Will it lead to a reduced footprint? Are there going to be other benefits? Are there cost savings out there from a procurement perspective that we could also use as a carrot for both our suppliers and internal organisations to drive harder on this? What impact will all this have on our Scope 3 calculation? So these are the sort of things that we're now looking at seriously, and this is where I think the challenge of wider and deeper engagement really comes into play. And if one suggestion that's already been made at the CDP webinar is we see that suppliers who have multiple invitations to participate are much likely to participate than those that get one invitation. So one of the interesting challenges is how can we increase that multiplier effect and ensure that more suppliers have multiple invitations to really focus them on why they should engage with the supply chain program. Moving on. So to share with you some of the slides we've had back from the CDP about how we could use the carrots of the benefits to get better engagement with those suppliers who are already reporting. And we can see from this slide, and this is one that Accenture has spoken about, whereby the number of suppliers that are investing in energy reduction activities, a lot of them now are seeing a relatively advanced payback period and are reporting savings against it. The evidence is there in the data that investments are just a cost. They do actually deliver short, medium or long-term benefits. And I think it's about finding ways to articulate that case better to suppliers in terms of the opportunities that are out there if they really are willing to engage on this program. Moving on. Again, looking at the difference in terms of risk and opportunities, in terms of engagement on risk and spotting the opportunities. The data shows us that there are lots of companies out there who are engaged, but could be more engaged on the risk focus, and certainly more could be engaged on the opportunities focus. So again, that's a carrot that we need to start putting in front of our suppliers to encourage them to engage with this program, because once they start to think about it, those sort of things will start to fall into place, and they will start to embed into their operations and start to embed carbon savings as well. A final slide in terms of climate and water as an opportunity as well. I think for our suppliers, these are areas where they could do more, so we will be looking at how we can drive that as well. And finally, I think this is another prize that's out there for most companies in terms of where are revenue opportunities for low carbon products. This is something that's beginning to be reported, and this is something that we're certainly looking at with our suppliers through that deeper sustainability design focus in terms of how can they and how can we create those low carbon products that can be a real hero product for the future. I think these are slightly longer term goals, but we need to start our suppliers looking at them now if they're going to be delivering in the future. Okay, Dexter?
Liz, thank you very much. I don't think we have a huge amount of time for questions at this stage. I will take note of all of the questions that have come through, and we can hopefully get back to some of you in the coming days. I have one question, Liz, that maybe you could speak to while we're here, and is there any correlation between the size of the supply chain respondent and their likelihood of responding, or if they do, the scores they attain?
What we've found is that the larger suppliers are more likely to have started to engage on carbon reduction and energy reduction and all the rest of it. So probably the larger companies are more likely. Maybe they've had more pressure from their customers or their investors. What I would say is that the small companies, the SMEs, particularly those that we reached out to in 2010 and did some workshops with, They started from a sort of totally non-engaged basis. They have come on quite fast. So when you want to engage, I don't think the size is a limiting factor. I think it's where the pressures come and the incentive comes to engage that is the challenge. And small companies perhaps feel less of that at the moment.
Great, thank you, Liz. And following on from what Liz mentioned and what Mike touched on as well in his presentation, of course, the more member companies that we have requesting data from suppliers, the better quality the response that we get. So if any of you are interested in exploring the possibility of membership of CDP Supply Chain, please find our contact details on the website cdproject.net. Thank you to our panelists today, very much appreciated. Great presentations from Accenture, FirstCarbon Solutions, Jaguar Land Rover and BT Group. Please do remember to log on to our website to download the latest report. It's very easy to read. I encourage you all to read over the coming days and weeks. So thank you very much for your time today, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you very much.